I got started in martial arts when I was about 6 or 7 years old. We were living on Guam at the time. My dad was in the Air Force, and I think my parents thought I needed to be toughened up a bit, so they enrolled me in judo. And I did that for a couple years, and we moved back to the States. I kind of dropped out of it. I got into karate for a year. And the year after that, I got into Bujinkan Budo Taijutsu, which I've been doing for 27 years now. What we do is called Bujinkan Budo Taijutsu. Bujinkan is the name of the actual organization that Hatsumi Sensei created in the 70s to actually oversee the martial art. Budo is the idea of the art of war, the way of war, and Taijutsu is basically the art of using the body. So Budo Taijutsu is the art of using the body for the purpose of war. And then Bujinkan Budo Taijutsu is the idea of this is the Bujinkan's way of using your body for warfare. Budo Taijutsu is derived from 9 different martial arts. Each of those martial arts have their own traditions, their own style of doing things. Kukushinryu, for example, is known primarily as a battlefield art. It uses armor, it uses heavy weapons, very, very hardcore, very much, stalk and kill the enemy on the battlefield sort of mentality. Some of the other schools that are more ninjutsu based, like Togakure-ryu, Kumagakure-ryu, things like that, are much more clandestine based, the idea being not to engage your enemy, but more to accomplish the mission. So a lot of the combat techniques in these more ninjutsu-based arts are more about engaging the enemy and escaping as opposed to trying to kill your enemy. Hatsumi Sensei is the current grandmaster, and he inherited the martial arts that comprise Bujinkan Budo Taijutsu. He inherited those from Takamatsu Sensei. And Takamatsu Sensei inherited those from a couple of different teachers in turn, and some of these arts go back hundreds and hundreds of years. What makes Muzosa authentic in how we do the art is that we try to do things the way that they're taught in Japan, in the sense of preserving the different ruha, the different schools that make up Bujinkan Budo Taijutsu. We also try to make sure that students understand what the whole of Bujinkan Budo Taijutsu is actually comprised of in terms of combat styles and philosophy and mentality. Students start training with weapons in our art from the very, very beginning. These are not the Okinawan weapons that people are familiar with in terms of karate. We use more traditional Japanese style weapons, which would be the katana, the spear, knife, weighted chains, and some more exotic weapons like the shuriken or throwing stars, and some specialized ninjutsu weapons as well. When people first come to our school, they have this idea of ninjas that they've gotten from the media and from movies, and quite honestly, a lot of that was perpetuated by the ninja themselves throughout history, so that people would be scared of them. A lot of the movie depictions of them are sort of derived from these legends, which makes them out to be very ruthless assassin types. The reality is that ninja were specialists in warfare in the same way that Navy SEALs and special ops groups are specialists in what they do. So there were things that in irregular warfare that either the samurai weren't trained to do, or they maybe found distasteful to do, or they just didn't have the manpower to do, in which case ninja were used for those purposes. The philosophy of Budo Taijutsu, I think, is really very pragmatic. It's very practical. There's no such thing as cheating. There's no such thing as a fair fight. Every fight should be unfair in your favor. The idea is that you want to be able to go home at the end of the day to your family. That's the most important thing. If you're walking with your family, you want to be able to keep them safe. It's not about being able to get in a fair fight with a person, with a mugger who's trying to hurt your family. So the problem sometimes can arise in martial arts that if you always train to fight fairly, when the time comes to cheat and not fight fairly, sometimes people have trouble making that switch, because the way that you train is the way that you fight. So if you fight fairly when you train, you tend to fight fairly when you're not training. For us, there's a definite idea of thinking outside the box. Put the sun in your opponent's eyes, spill beer on the floor and make them slip on it, swing the bar stool at them when they're not looking. Anything and everything is okay. But traditional martial arts, I think, have a depth of spirituality that comes from actually trying to understand the relationship between the practitioner and the world. So for example, within Budo Taijutsu, there's the idea that I have to understand when to kill somebody and when not to kill somebody. What am I willing to do in order to keep myself safe? Am I willing to maim people, hurt people? If somebody has a gun, if somebody has a knife, if somebody's threatening, maybe they don't see a weapon, but they're threatening to blow themselves up, what actions do I take and how far am I willing to go? Our purpose is, in terms of teaching in New York and living in New York, we try to make sure that students understand the pragmatic side of being able to actually apply these arts in an everyday sense in a modern society. We don't live in 16th century Japan, so being able to understand what those lessons from 16th century Japan actually mean in 21st century New York City is very, very important.